Dr. Mayer. We will now go to Dr. Mark Senior, Associate Scientist, Sunnybrook Health Sciences Center. It has mood disorder, and among other things, speaks to the lack of standards and evidence regarding MAID for mental illness. Dr. Mark Senior.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Senators. It's an honor to be with you today. I'm presenting today as an individual. These opinions are my own, but I'm an associate professor of psychiatry at the University of Toronto and a psychiatrist at Sunnybrook Health Sciences Center who specializes in the treatment of adults with complex mood and anxiety disorders. My research is focused on suicide prevention, and in particular, how media reporting and messaging across society influence suicide. I'm a recent former vice president of the board of the Canadian Association for Suicide Prevention, lead author on the Canadian Guidelines for Responsible Media Reporting about Suicide, and a steering group member of the International COVID-19 Suicide Prevention Research Collaboration. I should note that I am not involved in MAID assessment or provision. I am also not a conscientious objector to MAID and have no professional concerns about its use when provided at the end of life as articulated in the prior iteration of the legislation. To be transparent, my professional agenda, both in general and in these deliberations, is to do my best to help contribute to a Canadian society with fewer suicides. And it is through that lens that I will raise concerns in this hearing. Suicide really ought to be at the forefront of our discussion today. This is because legalized medical assistance in dying at the end of life, which arose following the Carter case, really has minimal overlap with suicide. MAID for physical illness, which was the subject of the Truchon-Gladue case, has some potential overlap with suicide. However, MAID for mental illness may be difficult or even potentially impossible to reliably differentiate from suicide, both in individuals and in public perception. And thus we have a need for much greater attention to suicide in these deliberations. It is actually inappropriate even to call this medical assistance in dying, as we are no longer assisting in a death process that is already occurring, but rather inducing death many years or decades before its natural occurrence as a means of coping with emotional suffering, which is in essence the definition of suicide. So here we're really speaking about physician-assisted, or even more correctly, induced death. I have had the opportunity to watch some of the prior testimony and will note that it has been a good encapsulation of the complex philosophical arguments on both sides. Like Drs. Gained and Raji, I share concerns about the lack of clear evidence regarding what constitutes an irremediable mental illness and whether such a potential phenomenon can reliably be predicted by psychiatrists. Evidence from my own work and that of international colleagues has also shown that a public emphasis on death as a useful coping strategy in response to emotional suffering often leads to more suicides across a population, while an emphasis on hope, survival, and resilience may lower suicides. It is plainly true that the Canadian government's endorsement of death for mental illness would be diametrically opposed to the evidence-based messages we in the suicide prevention community are trying to promulgate. According to previous survey data, these or similar concerns are shared by the majority of psychiatrists in Canada who oppose physician-induced death as an intervention for mental illness. I have also listened to forceful and earnest articulation of the minority psychiatric view, as you've heard here this afternoon. In this situation where we have hypotheses in different directions, who is correct? The honest answer is we do not know with any reasonable certainty. We have a mechanism for resolving competing hypotheses in science. That is rigorous scientific study and data. And unfortunately, it is my duty to report that those advocating for this legislative change have failed to conduct the research and or provide the evidence necessary to carefully support their claims. I will explain why this is a problem using the analogy of a COVID-19 vaccine. Vaccines had already been developed by early 2020. The first Pfizer trial began in April of last year. And at that stage, most of us would probably have agreed that it was a good idea in principle to inoculate the population. Yet we did not do so until late December. And in the meantime, millions have died worldwide. Why has there not been an outcry by scientists and bioethicists? The answer is because it would have been wrong to provide a vaccine without first rigorously testing its safety and effectiveness across the population. Researchers had to characterize COVID-19's effects in the absence of a vaccine, had to quantify how the vaccination mitigated those efforts, and had to quantify carefully all of the potential unexpected harms and demonstrate that these did not outweigh benefits. This is the established process when proposing new medical interventions. What would that process look like for establishing the safety, if it's possible, of physician-induced death for mental illness? First, the field would need to develop and validate instruments to identify what constitutes the threshold for intolerable suffering. Second, studies would need to be conducted to determine whether patients receiving a wide range of psychiatric treatments continue to experience intolerable suffering thereafter. Note that this has never actually been studied. Prior research has only examined ongoing symptom and functional impairment, which may be related but are not the same thing. Third, if that phenomenon is quantified, standardized processes must be proposed for predicting who among psychiatric patients will continue to experience intolerable suffering. Fourth, studies must be conducted to estimate how often those predictions are wrong, so-called false positive cases. And fifth, there must be a host of studies examining other ancillary harms, such as suicide contagion, to ensure that they do not outweigh the benefits. I wish that data were in existence, as then we could have an informed conversation about how to move forward. Unfortunately, this inchoate and nascent area of research has been presented to you as one where these answers are already well understood and resolved. They are not. We can all have opinions, but as a country, we must support science over rhetoric, no matter how cleverly or vehemently delivered. If physician-induced death becomes legally available and accessible for Canadians with sole mental illness, there's a very high likelihood that many individuals whose conditions could be remediated, as you heard by the last two speakers, with outstanding mental health care, will be deemed to have irremediable illness as a result of an assessment error and flaws in our system of provision of mental health care. They will die unnecessarily and prematurely as a result. The only question is how many, and sadly, no one has done the work to answer that question and inform this discussion. As a result, quite ironically, if this legislative change moves forward, it will result in a large number of premature deaths, the outcome which the original Carter ruling was explicitly rendered to prevent. For these reasons, I respectfully ask the senators to suspend any further legislative changes until such time as adequate study by unbiased sources can be conducted to inform this discussion according to usual medical evidentiary standards. Thank you, and wishing health and well-being to all during the pandemic.